Welcome to Fraud Friday. I'm Bob Coleman, and we're talking loan fraud, bankers, public officials, and borrowers who got caught. What I thought I'd talk about today is the False Claims Act. Now, this is not criminal fraud. I guess you could say it's civil fraud, but it allows if you want to know the history, okay, for those of you who don't know, I have my undergraduate degree is in actually medieval history. And the provision goes back to the Middle Ages, qui tam, which allowed someone to sue on behalf of the king. And so in England, if there was a dispute over wine and they were supposed to be doing something or paying something, and they say, hey, that merchant didn't pay the tax, they could sue that merchant and get a reward for doing that. Well, that's evolved over the years, and it became law in the United States during the Civil War. And during the Civil War, there was a lot of fraud, a lot of scams. Let me quote this. It said, during the war, unscrupulous contractors for both the North and the South, this was not one-sided, sold the Union Army decrepit horses, mules in ill health, faulty rifles and ammunition, and rancid rations and provisions, among other unscrupulous actions. So when this happened, you were the quartermaster or you were a merchant, and a competitor, and this is what our story is today, we're talking about, you could sue as the competitor, say, hey, Jack down the road with the horses, I know those horses, and those were not up to what the invoice stated, and the government didn't get what they deserved. You could go to court, and they say, fine, Jack, we're going to refund $1,000, and the person who sued him would get a percentage of that. So that's how all of that is. And what happens is anybody can sue. They automatically get whistleblower protections, which is interesting if you're a lender. Okay, how does a false claim work? For the PPP world or for lenders, a false claim occurs when the federal government writes a check. In PPP loans, the false claim, there is a false claim in terms of when they apply for the loan and they make a misrepresentation. That is a criminal act, but that there's no transactional thing there. It occurs when they apply for forgiveness. And then the government says, okay, you don't have to pay that back. That is the monetary transaction. And also with lenders, the common one are guarantee payments. When a lender applies for a defaulted loan to get paid on the guarantee, if the government writes the lender that check and the government misrepresented something, that lender can be subject to false claim. And also if it's an employee, then the employee gets whistleblower protection, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so let's talk about our case. Skilled nursing facility here in Southern California. They had 16 different loans, PPP loans, all by Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo was not part of this because lenders have a safe harbor in the original PPP loan legislation. So the lenders, fine, but a competitor, actually the gentleman is a CPA, and he's a nursing home administrator. He has that license, and I'm assuming he was a competitor. Say, why are these people getting $18 million for PPP loans when they're a large entity? And what happened was, and now the company is United Care. They settled, no admittance of anything. So I have to be careful in terms of the allegations. What is alleged is that they got PPP loans, 16 different PPP loans, and they represented that each of these individual nursing home facilities, which would employ 75 to 100 people, were individual small businesses. That was legitimate. The problem is the SBA rules of affiliation. The government and the lawsuits stated that, hey, this was all the same entity because we had common ownership, we had common affiliation. And the common ownership created the affiliation. So United Care settled $18 million. What's also interesting is when they settled, there were 13 loans out there for about $11-12 million. So that was part of that, but they have 3 additional loans for about $3-4 million. Those were not forgiven by the lender, and they are in the settlement agreement, they're repaying that as agreed. So not only did they have to pay the $18 million, then they also had to add on the additional $3 or $4 million. Why wasn't this a criminal act? I can't answer that other than the money was used for employee wages because the loans were forgiven. Wells Fargo did their due diligence. They got the paperwork and said, yeah, it was supposed to. So to rise to the level of criminality, the government would have to prove that, hey, there was a concerted conspiracy, that the people knew that they were ineligible, so they did this individually. And the government obviously made the decision that was too high of a bar to meet, but they went after him civilly. Our whistleblower got $2 million. How do I feel about that? As a general rule, we've reported in the past about a CP, about an entity that was a law firm who went after homeowners associations. They went through the database and they say, hey, this is a homeowner association. And because of the special tax designation, which I don't know offhand, homeowners have that nonprofit tax designation. They were all ineligible. So he filed, allegedly, or no, there was a filing of false claims on that, and they got a big payday. This person was a competitor. Fine. If the company was ineligible for PPP financing, they shouldn't have gotten the loans. I think we all agree with that. I have no problem with that. Now, the money did go to pay the employees, but there's also a clause in there that we sometimes forget when we talk about PPP loan fraud. And the borrower had to represent that if I don't get this loan, my business may very well fail. I'm in financial distress because of the pandemic. And that is a certification that they had to make. Obviously, the United Care wanted this to go away. They wrote the check. They paid off the whistleblower, and they're going to pay off the Wells Fargo as agreed. So there's no loss in the PPP loan program. There's obviously a loss to this facility that they're repaying the government. So except for them, all ends well. Hey, thank you for joining us for Fraud Friday. I hate when I watch YouTube videos, but I got to do it. We're close to 1,000 subscribers. If you don't mind clicking up that subscribe button, I would appreciate it. Thank you for joining us for Fraud Friday.